Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pride Afrique. This is a panel discussion, and we're going to be focusing on interfaith, sexuality, gender dialogue with Judy Macaulay. I am the founder and CEO at House of Rainbow. It is a great delight for me to be on this panel with distinguished colleagues and friends. In fact, they're all family to me. So we're going to be talking a lot about the things that has affected us on our journey of faith. So I'm going to actually go to Sheyi. Sheyi, would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers?
Sweet. Peace, everyone. My name is Sheyi Adebanjo. I use they, them pronouns. I'm Yoruba, come out of Lagos, Nigeria, and I am a traditionalist, as I will call myself in Nigeria, or Yoruba spiritualist practitioner, or a West African traditional practitioner. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. And I'll ask Imale to introduce yourself.
Hi, so my name is Imale. I'm queer. I use the pronoun she, her, and I'm a spiritualist, and I'm excited to have this conversation. Yeah.
It's really amazing. And of course, I'll go to Ishmael to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ishmael Bahati. I am from Kenya. I am a gay, identifying also with the Islamic faith. I also work around helping gender and sexual minorities to reconcile their sexuality and their spirituality. Thank you.
Fantastic. And finally, but not the least, Ricky.
Good day, everyone. My name is Ricky Hospital Cancer, and I'm a Motswana who is a transgender person who is called to faith and also called to ministry within a Christian kind of traditional setting. And much like everybody on here, I'm a person who strongly believes in reconciling and enabling others to reconcile their own faith with their sexual identity or gender identity.
Fantastic. And I think we're going to be talking, looking at three different angles of this conversation. And the first one is actually coming out as a person of faith. Many of us have struggled with coming out. For me, I've struggled with coming out as a gay man and a Christian, but it got to a point I was able to reconcile that. And I always say that I'm a happy, holy homosexual. And I'm going to go first to Ricky. Ricky, what is your journey like coming out as a person of faith and your identity, your sexual orientation? Take us on that journey.
So ideally, mine has been a very interesting journey that did not necessarily entail coming out, but I guess I kind of was born out and had to navigate really being very open in a space that had to grapple with my identity as a trans little kid who was raised by a family that is staunch Christian with very strong fundamentalist views on God as a spirit, on God as an omniparent. And that's one thing that I often refer to God as, that I often feel is neglected. But I grew up in a setting where my family was both very traditionalist in terms of our cultural practices and customs, and strongly believing in a lot of religious doctrine as per Christianity, which is predominant in Botswana. And I was raised to understand that God is this spirit that is very intentional about creating anything, and that I was a part of a greater creation of God that God was happy about, and that God was very deliberate about where to place any particular person with any particular family. And with that, then I grew more and more into myself in a very enabling environment, nuclearly within my family, that is, and having to then continuously grow in confidence of wanting to understand, but why is it that I come from a background that sees God differently to how many other people see God insofar as God's relation to us as queer folks? So I'm a person who was gifted in terms of musical ability just from childhood, still retain the voice even now. But part of what
I'm certainly going to come to that, because I want to hear more about the joy of that music. So there's something that you said. I want to like just go to Sheyi for this.
Yes.
God is a spirit, Sheyi. How do you connect? Are you able to connect with Ricky on that point? Tell us your journey of coming out, and I also want you to maybe respond to Ricky on God is a spirit.
Thank you. There's a bunch of different points to touch on that. Yeah, like you know, as someone who practices Orisha from Nigeria, looking at Olodumare, Olodumare translates into the womb of creation, right? So Olodumare created us all. Olodumare knows who we are. Olodumare, like, knows we're divine and gave us permission to be here. And so, like, the spirit is all around us, and the spirit of Olodumare has not only allowed us to be here, but also, like, we had this conversation before we came here with Olodumare in terms of, like, my belief. And so I think it's a misnomer when people are like, we don't have the right to be here. And especially as someone who is trans and also gender nonconforming, it's really been important for me to look at the different aspects of Yoruba that are supportive. And what I find interesting, especially as a practitioner, is that you can't take spirituality and religion out of the culture, and you can't take it out of the language in Nigeria. And so a lot of folks who are like, we don't have the right to be here, can't really do a lot about it because we're already embedded in the culture, and looking at, like, Nigeria also being something that the pronouns are gender neutral. There isn't, like, she or he in Yoruba as a language also allows room for us to be. And I think that has been a part of my journey of constantly coming out, being born to a family of pluralists. A lot of Nigerians practice multiple spirituality or religion, and that's something that doesn't always get talked about. And for my family, my mom grew up as a traditionalist. Her great grandmother raised her, and my father grew up as a Muslim. He's now a Christian. And so to have, like, my mom being okay with what I'm doing and my dad not being okay is also part of, like, the colonialism that happened in Nigeria. And so I think for him, he's still, like, reconciling me being queer and then also being of trans experience is still his journey. So I'll stop there.
I'm certainly going to come back to that because I want to hear more about the joy and challenges. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I'm going to go to Imale. Imale, you are a spiritualist. You know, you just had Ricky and Sheye make that expression and connection. How does it connect with you also with coming out? You're muted if you want to.
I realized I was muted. So my journey was that I grew up in a Christian home. My family is very Christian, and we grew up within the church. So it was throughout church, homosexuality was sort of drawn into our minds as being something that is not right and something that is Western in nature, and so just not right. It was an abomination to God, and you being homosexual was just seen as something that was bad. So once I started to come out within and explore my sexuality, I felt like I needed to leave behind my faith. I sort of had to divorce myself from that, because how can I be myself, or how can I be fully present in a space that won't even acknowledge me as a person? So I at that point felt faith and spirituality and religion was not for me. So for me, part of my journey of reconciling with my faith has been shaking off all the labels that come with faith and sort of exploring and trying to find a relationship with God that's defined by my own terms. And so even if my Christian background has given me the foundation on which to build my understanding of God. So what that means is it's facilitated how I think about God. What one of my worries before that reconciliation was that God will never see me fully, you know. And now understanding that relationship that between me and God is personal has really helped me find my feet within faith and sort of find my feet within spirituality. And now I'm at the stage where it's now finding the language to fit around me rather than using the labels that are used within society, but finding what fits comfortable around me, because I am defining my relationship with God. And even if the language at the moment does not fit, it's the least of my worries, because me and God are creating something that I feel like empowers me from within. So yeah, so my journey of reconciliation.
I just love the way that you said that. I love the way that you said me and God, you know, we have our thing going on. Ishmael, you know, on this particular side, you know, coming out. I mean, you've had, you know, our colleagues here. So coming out as a person of faith in Islam for you, How was it?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I want to ride on to what Imali has just mentioned, that it's more, what matters is about your relationship with God and how you work it out. For me, reconciling my sexuality and my faith was one of the best things that ever did happen to me. My struggle and my journey in my denials was around faith. It was not about what people would say. It was about doing the right thing in my faith, given that I grew up in both Islam and Christianity. My mother is a Christian, is a Muslim. My father is a Christian. And having tested of the two religions, and in my struggles, I tried to balance into finding the answers into these two faiths. And my breaking point basically was at that time when I was able to reconcile, and it was a journey that I was led into. I was not prepared for it. It's only up to that time that I realized that the two can actually work. Because for me, my struggle was about the two not working together. But when I found out that two can work together, we can find a way of working them together. This was the best thing that ever happened to me. But then, my coming out really, for my friends, I came out slowly by slowly. To whosoever mattered. Until now, I can say that I've not completely come out to some people. I'm open, as you can know me, but I don't think I have come out to most of my people. For my family, just when I was preparing, I felt that I was ready to come out to them. I was outed to them, and I took the opportunity to really speak out about it.
And I think you already started that conversation, Ishmael, about the joys and challenges of coming out. And I'm going to actually start with you. And I think that is not always easy. I mean, I personally went through a period of time where I could not tell my Christian friends that I'm gay, and I could not tell my gay friends that I'm a Christian because of the conflict. So I'm actually going to start with you, Ishmael. You know, I mean, tell us, what are the joys, or maybe one joy and one challenge that you face. So just give us a snapshot of those realities.
Yeah, I would start with the challenges. The challenges is basically getting space to people in Islam, given the information that people already have, the misinformation that people already have about faith and sexuality, that the two cannot work. You've got to choose between one and two. And for me, the joy is also that not having to hide. You know, I don't have to hide myself in anything. I need space that I get, and I need to speak out. I don't need to weigh out who is in the room and all that. I just speak out because I'm already open as I can. The other thing is about if you realize very well that people are being blackmailed and extorted because they are closeted. Closeted is not a bad thing. But it only gives a comfort for a short while. You need to come out at some point. So for me, I seize every opportunity to speak out. And the joy of myself coming out is that people have gotten used to me in this manner. You know, they do not need me to keep reminding them, you know, I'm gay. No, they have already come to terms with that. If they have not had come to terms with that, that's their own problem to deal with.
Wow, that is very strong. Listen, I'm going to go to Ricky next, because Ricky, you started to talk about the joy of music. I'm sure there must be other joys. And also, don't forget to share the challenges as well. Go on, my sister.
No, I echo everything that Ismail was saying, and also even just, I guess, a lot that has been said by Sayi and Imale, in that for me, existing within a very conservative faith of the Methodist Church, which is what I was raised within, as this very overtly transgender person that grew as a little kid, who was seen growing into her youth, becoming a youth conductor to the church choir, and continuously just showcasing the way in which God uses these other vessels that otherwise would have been considered to be abhorrent or to have been ungodly. And you, with just by an existence within the church space, having seen myself transform the conversation around God as this lover of diversity, because God created everything. And the more I continuously excelled, both within my own faith space and just outward in terms of my own career trajectory, the more people got to be able to celebrate God as this lover of of diversity and the creativity that God has in being able to make each and every one of us a very unique being. And obviously that has come with a bag of its own challenges, in that it brought a lot of other divisions within the church itself, in terms of questioning the church on what its own doctrine position is on LGBTI inclusion, which has been an ongoing conversation in the Methodist Church as far back as 2001 to date, that has not necessarily been even reconciled. But the more many of us like myself who are coming forward and saying and narrating our narratives of a God that has called us to have to speak out about God, like Ishmael is saying, that I'm unable to not talk about the fact that I am trans, I was made by God, and God wants to use me to continuously showcase the way in which God is able to use us in all various ways to make the world a better place, for which then my own advocacy and activism and the visibility I'm raising around trans persons generally in the world reconciles very neatly with the very doctrine that I'm called to and the queer theology that I subscribe to, of which I'm forever using platforms that I'm given within the church itself to continuously talk about some of the other even narratives that are contained around queer narratives within the Bible that many at times a very conservative kind of interpretation of scripture just simply overlooks, and as such challenging the prevailing kind of doctrine of the Methodist Church at this point in time. So there has been a lot of pushback, obviously. I have seen friends who've been excommunicated in my church who I really, really loved and cherished just because they were ministers and they were persons who were queer and being forced to have to live and exist in a space where they cannot express love to those that they are actually in love with. Of which a transgender
we're going to come back. We're certainly going to,
thinking.
Ricky, we're going to talk about the reconciling journey, because I do identify that the pain that many people have been through. But I really want to go to Sheyi, because Sheyi, are you able to connect with what Ishmael and Ricky has said, particularly around the joys and challenges, and what's your own journey? Because as an Ifa practitioner, you must have had the challenges and also being a non-binary individual.
It's a journey. Yes, I can totally connect with what my colleague said. I think for me, it's just been many journeys. As someone born in Nigeria and then like was brought to the United States as an immigrant, of like that also being a part of the journey and looking at like how my parents, who yes, they wanted the best for me, but they were still in this mentality of like the only good thing you can be is a Christian or a Muslim. So trying to like convince my dad that, you know, being a traditionalist is a good thing. So that was like also part of the journey, and looking at like coming out multiple times as a queer person and then coming out like outright as someone who's gender nonconforming, and then started to take hormones and, you know, looking the way that I do now, which is beautiful because I was created by Olodumare. So it's been like multiple journeys and really looking in Nigeria of like how to be out, right? People knowing who I am, and then like it's one thing to know and it's another thing to put language to it. And Nigeria is a very funny place in that we know everyone. There's so many people who have multiple genders in Nigeria, multiple sexuality, and it becomes a thing when you name it, right? And so it's like being able to look at like what are the spaces to outright say I'm queer and trans, and what spaces to just be and walk in my full self, right? And I think that that's a dichotomy that most of us face in our different countries, and also looking at how within faith to look at the spaces where we see the gender fluidity that's already happening within the practice of Yoruba. We see the gender fluidity that happens in the culture, and saying that this is part of who we are and it isn't something that was brought to us. And so where I see like the challenges is that people now say, trying to be dogmatic, like the Muslims and the Christians, and saying that, you know, as traditionalists, we don't have queerness, we don't have trans folks, and that was an import, and pushing back and saying that that is wrong, and pushing back and saying like, look at the Orishas themselves. They embody all these qualities around gender fluidity and around sexuality. And so that those have been parts of like the pushback I've had to do. And I will say the joys is looking at like spirit and ancestors being like, we embrace all that you are. We see you, you are a spirit. And so whatever gender representation you choose to take is something that is within what Olodumare has created. And so it's been great to see like how in readings and at home and just like in the culture, spirit is down for it. And so that part of the reconciliation, I think, has been great for me in my journey. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That is so powerful. Right, Imale, on this particular question, joys and challenges, what's that for you? You need to unmute yourself, don't forget.
Keep forgetting I'm on mute. Right, so one of the challenges that I've faced is how navigating Christian spaces, because one of the things that I have difficulties understanding is how can you say that the God that you worship is selective on who he loves and who goes into who gets to go into heaven and who gets to be prized, essentially. And so one of the challenges around that has been navigating familiar places where we all congregate and we talk about these things, and the kind of bigotry that I hear guised under religion is, that's one of the challenges that I do not understand, because you cannot, to me, and my understanding of how I'm now starting to understand God, is that everything that God created is good and everything that God created is wonderful. So who are you to then say, actually, because of XYZ, you're not making a mark? So that's been one of the challenges that I've faced. And one of the joys just really embracing God has been one of the best things that has happened to me. It's the difference in my life has been night and day, and it's sort of that defining God for myself has really, I've seen the miracles that God can work in people's lives. I've seen the power of God, and the joy is that I don't have to explain that. So the way that God works in my life, I don't have to explain it to you in a way that you understand, because I know for myself that, you know what, God has done this, you know what I mean? Like, God has empowered me. Me and God are good. Like, what you and your God are saying about this person not being right, this person, you and your God's bigotry that's you. I have nothing to do with that. And just being able to sort of proudly say that has been changed my life, really. So yeah.
I can see the agreement in the room. Listen, honestly, you just started on that journey of reconciliation, and I've got some points that each of you have made, but I'm actually going to start with Imale. I think this is like my unique style. Imale, tell us maybe one or two things that you have done to reconcile your faith and your sexuality. And honestly, think about the young people, think about other people around us that might just want to hear some of those key things, because we're all on that journey. So tell us, what have you done specifically
Well,
to
that
reconcile?
specifically.
The other thing again is that what is the boldness that makes you move forward with being a spiritual person?
Okay, so what for me, the first and most important thing for me was to shake off the labels, because labels feel claustrophobic almost, So even my understanding of religion then was through the guise of like institutions and all of that. So shaking off the labels completely meant that I was starting anew. Everything I was relearning from scratch. So it's that it's sort of, the relearning has kicked off my discovery. So, and it's been nice to not do it within the boxes of the church, within the restrictions of the church, and sort of being like, okay, God created this world. Go explore, go see God in everything that you do, And if that's like in the morning looking out the window, I see God, If I see a child running, I see God. And it's that boldness of knowing that God is everywhere and within me. I feel God isn't within me, I can't not be bold, I have to stand tall in everything that I do and everything that I say, because I have a power in me that is greater than the power that if I try to move without that power, you know what I mean? If I'm not connected to that power, like if I'm not connected to that power, I don't have that boldness, I don't have that courage. But if I've got, when I'm acknowledging the God within me, it really does empower me. It really feels like anything that I want to do, I will get it done. And there's nothing that anyone on the external can say to discourage me. There's nothing that your thoughts, your beliefs, your cognitive thinking cannot challenge me, because I know what I know. I've experienced what I've experienced, and you can't challenge it. So that, just knowing that me and God have a thing between me and God really, really pushes me, you know, like.
I just love the way you say that. Listen, I'm gonna go to Ishmael, and it's like, you know, so Ishmael, you started to talk about, you know, get used to me, and don't forget to unmute yourself because you're going to respond to that. Get used to me. You know, what else will you say to people that are on that journey, or how you have reconciled? Because honestly, it's okay to say to people, get used to me. And once they get used to you, what else is there to hide? Tell us what you've done and what people can do for themselves.
Well, the beauty about Islam is that it encourages people to read for themselves and do researches for themselves outside of the Quran. And this makes Islam very unique because as far as I know, many other religious books restrict people into it, you know, like we have all the answers in this, but Islam provides that that you can go and research beyond. If you don't get answers in the Quran, you can go out there, search in science. It encourages searching in science. It encourages reading other religious books so that you can find the answers that you're looking for. Read for yourselves. And this is one thing I encourage queer people of faith, that do not base your judgment or your own sorrows based on what a pastor, a bishop, or an imam told you on the pulpit. Go search for yourself, get answers for yourself, so that you are all, you know, you can also argue out your case. Another thing that I have also done is that, okay, so again, Islam also says that if you don't find the answers in the science and in other books, use logic. You know, use logic. Does it make sense to you? If it makes sense for you, go for it. So these are the things that I encourage other people to take it from. Another thing that I've done also is that I've also traveled. You know, traveling in holy places. I've been to Rome. I have been to a resurrection grave. I've been to Gethsemane. I've been to Sodom and Gomorrah. I have been to Mecca. So all these things, so that you can just have that feeling, you know, because, you know, there's that judgment, you know, that comes without exposure. You know, maybe I'm making my own religion. Maybe I'm just wrong, you know. But when you're in those places, for example, go to Mecca during Hajj and see if God won't strike. If God won't strike, you question what you have learned before, because that's what you have been told, that if you go to Mecca and you are not holy enough, then you are likely to die from there, or bad things will happen to you. Show them that there are people that, even gay people that have gone there and they have come back alive. And this speaks a lot about what God intends for us. And I think, yeah, I'll leave it at that. I have a lot to say.
Thank you so much. I'm heading to Ricky's direction now, because, and I know that, you know, being a trans woman, a Botswana trans woman, an African woman, a leader in our community, many people are looking to you to say, Ricky, how did you reconcile? Tell us. You need to unmute.
Ideally for me, the reconciliation began when I began to see God in the way that my late grandfather said, that God is both our mother and our father in one. And with that, what my granddad was doing was teaching me that God is an omniparent, and that God is genderless, and that God is sexless, of which we have been led by the religious doctrine in Christianity that has foregrounded and likened God to man. But we understand that instead there was a spirit that was blown into us that created humankind. The minute I was able to start now seeing God outside of the confines of human definition and labeling, like Imale was saying, of the kind of labels that are assigned to God as our Father who art in heaven, and beginning to see our parent who art in heaven, it totally shifted the discourse for me to be able to see God as just superseding all of which we have created as social constructs, including sex, including gender. And you will find that a scripture that I love a lot, which is Galatians 3, verses 28, that says, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, there's no slave nor free, there's no male nor female, for you are all one in Christ, Jesus Christ. And with that, I always refer back to it because it reminds me, even within our own scripture that helps us to navigate understanding and creating a relationship with God, that God looks beyond the limits that we've created for ourselves. Even these limitations and labels that we have assigned, that we have now decided to confer dignity, love, respect on certain particular persons and rob others of that. God sees beyond that. And the question then becomes exactly what Imali was saying. What relationship do you have with God? How do you communicate to this God? And how do you listen to this God within the greater noise that I feel many at times we hear within fundamentalist kind of doctrine and thinking around religion and faith? And ideally, as well as the very ultimate of what I was able to reconcile my identity with my faith, was just this understanding that we are all created with a greater purpose about life. And whatever religion you subscribe to, whatever form of supplication you adhere to, ultimately, if we look at life just as a thing that we ought to require accountability for to that one who gave it to us in the ultimate, one gets to realize that you need to live your life with purpose. And then you need to live with your life knowing that you need to ultimately come back to account. How well have you lived with others in this world? To what extent have you contributed to developing your community towards doing good, and not just doing what is right, but doing what is righteous? Because I always say there's a clear distinction between doing what is right, of which a lot of fundamentalist thinking will tell you this is what is right and this is what is wrong, end of story. But the question is, as we learn it from the social justice message of Jesus Christ, is that there is something fundamentally called righteousness that needs to be done, and that is what needs to lead our lives. And the question then becomes, when ultimately you go back to whatever deity that has created you, how do you account for the days of your life and say to it that this is what I've created? So for me, I learned to understand that God is just a spirit. It is a God. And like Sei was saying, in my own Tswana culture, we don't have a gender assigned to God. God ki Modimo ka Setswana. So ke rapela Modimo, and Modimo created me. And when you get to reconcile with that, even particularly our African traditional belief systems really are rich in being able to help us understand God outside of the binary.
Rika, I'm just hearing, and that's the point that I'm actually wanting Sheyi to address because of the traditional pathway. And let me just put it this way. I mean, Sheyi, please get ready, because I really want you to talk on this, because I mean, I've traveled a lot, and I hear what Ishmael is saying. I think that when you travel, you expose yourself to more knowledge just by traveling alone. And I have been to South Africa. I have visited the Sangoma shrines in South Africa, not for consultation, but, as part of my own knowledge and worldview, because I know what the headline will read in Nigeria. Nigerian gay pastor visits Sangoma shrine in South Africa for extraordinary powers. But listen, honestly, to me, that headline doesn't actually bother me at all. But when we're talking about reconciling our faith and sexuality, Sheyi, traditional healing, the traditional pathway, take us on that journey. Educate us, educate the people that are listening to this broadcast right now. Go on, educate us on that.
First thing I'll say is it's really important who you surround yourself with. Right? So are you looking at having Babalaos and Iyanifas, who are the leaders, who are the folks you can go to for consultations, who are open and who are really looking at Olodumare, who are really looking at spirit for what it is as this energy that created us here and supports us in all having a purpose? Or are you talking to someone who's closed-minded and bigoted? So that's the first thing I would say, right? And the second thing I would say is like really looking at like, how do you get to your own personal relationship with spirit when it comes to a traditional lens? And that was something that was really important for me. And my journey, I think I'm really privileged in that I can connect my journey to my great-grandmother and different folks back in Nigeria and say like, my great-grandmother was an Oya priestess, and looking at the deity of Oya and how within Oya, she's already gender fluid within herself, right? She's a warrior, she's a mother, she's the one who brings about transformation and change. And looking at how my great-grandmother, Moloa Yaloya, was able to like bring this practice and bring this change in Isha Remo. And so that has been part of my journey of looking at like going for consultation, going back home and talking to my mom and like how she grew up and how she saw spirit, and seeing within, it's called the Odu Corpus, which is like kind of like the Bible or the text for Orisha practitioner, like all this space that allows us to be within spirit, within our body and outside of our body. And that's really important to look at the, I guess the Odu compass that like encourages and talks about equality and talks about like the support of all gender and sexuality. And so that has been part of my journey. And also looking at like documenting others outside of myself. I think it was important for me to not only reconcile my space, but look at that it was important to be someone who had a voice and who documented others as a filmmaker and as an organizer, so that people can see that there are more people in its practice and that they can come back home to Olodumare, to spirit, because they created us. And that has been an important part of my journey. But I'll say really at the end of the day is really looking at like, especially with traditional practice, is how it is all elements of nature and the universe, and how we have been written before time and now, and going back to those texts and looking at how spirit allows us to be. And that's really been like the important part of the journey of how, like, if you call it Ifa, if you call it Yoruba spirituality, has been since the existence of time and allowed us to overcome and just thinking about like getting out of colonialism and bringing peace, or like our own type of unity in Nigeria. And that in the different traditional practices, there's always been space for us to be and to like be conduits for spirit, to be storytellers, to be the ones who bring this medicine. And that's been the important part of the journey as a traditionalist. So I'll stop there. There's more I can say.
Thank you so much to every one of you. I mean, for me, reconciling my faith and my sexuality was the moment I was able to say to my gay friends, I'm a Christian, and I was able to say to my Christian friends that I'm gay. And since that moment, I have always used the acronym GAY to mean God adores you, God accepts you, God admits you, and so on and so forth. But I also want to conclude at this point. Ishmael, you said people just need to get used to you because you have become more visible to the people around you. And Ricky said, we are unique beings. And that for me is very key. So we are all unique beings before God, before our full understanding of who we are. And of course, Sheyi, you were talking more about the Olodumare, who takes our culture and also embrace gender fluidity. And I think that, for Imale, Imale focused on God that is love. And I cannot, God's ways work for me, and I have that relationship with God. And I truly hope that I have represented you all well. I want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. This is Pride Afrique, a conversation and a dialogue with Judy Macaulay. God bless you. Thank you.